Well, listen, this 3-part series, we're going to work on what I like to call my map, which is my approach towards dealing with stuff, things like that. And what I mean by stuff and things like that is as you move through life, you get to learn your lessons through good things that happen and through other things that happen. And obviously we desire good things to happen, but sometimes other things happen. And as we know that during this COVID reflection, we have an opportunity to learn a different side of ourselves. And Jamar, we've both committed to ourselves, and we're not going to get on this show with inspiring and creating and empowering and try to poo-poo it with nonsense about what's going on in the world. We're on the opposite end. But I thought we could use this to kind of explore a concept that's a little bit difficult to understand in a time like this. So I want to get into mindfulness a little bit. And look, Jamar, I wrote a blog, and there was a 4-part series, and then I'm going to write 2 more. And the first 4 was more of like an awareness situation, and the next 2 is going to be kind of like the way out. But I've learned that when your fingers don't work because you tweaked your neck, it's a little harder to write, and it takes a lot longer. And yeah,
hey, bro, that right there, that's why I love you, right there. That is why I love you, right? Because you think about it as in the mindset that you need to have to embark on whatever journey you want to embark on. So I love the fact that you came and created the map. But how, Coach D, how did you come up with the whole concept of, boom, the map, mindfulness, awareness, and purpose? Like, how did you come to that revelation?
It's a perspective situation. At one point, I did so much suffering that it was almost like I ran out of tears to cry. And it wasn't about the tears running down my face. It was about the feeling that I had on the inside of devastation of my life being over. So I've learned to look at something like, even the word devastation, we were having our pre-production meeting, and I was like, I just don't like this word. I don't like it. So I just got knocked down. Life got difficult. Things overwhelmed me, and it was so far outside of my control that my past experiences had no solution for what it is that I was going through. So it wasn't exactly the easiest thing to deal with, but what I did through this is I earned a skill set that now I can share. For the longest time when I was suffering and I didn't see my life purposefully because there was all this noise around me in my head or whatever, expectation and this and that, it was really tough to be mindful, because a lot of the times when I started to focus on my thoughts, I definitely didn't like what was going on in my head. So it was difficult to understand a concept that was so scary. So as we're going through this new understanding, this different time, this not so desired moment, these not so desired thoughts and feelings, I think mindfulness is a very important thing. Well, it's a good place on the map to start, because we got a lot of steps to make, but to not get overwhelmed, we got to figure out which the first one is. So I'm going to start with a definition that I found of mindfulness, just to kind of clear the air, to give somebody a little something to hold on to as we get started, because I can be wordy. I'm an Action Jackson type guy.
Come on, baby.
I'm going to give it to you plain and simple. Here you go. In a few seconds, this is the inspire section of mindful, and we're going to start off with a definition.
You may have heard this word mindfulness. It's become something of a buzz phrase of late. I'm going to give you one simple, serviceable definition, which is this. Mindfulness is the ability to know what's happening in your head at any given moment without getting carried away by it.
Wow.
That's it. Mindfulness. Mindfulness.
The ability to know what's going on in your head at any given moment without being carried away with it.
That's it.
What does that mean? Obviously that could be a very clear message, but what does that mean to you, and how have you been able to come to the point where saying, hey, this mindfulness thing is actually real? Like this is a tangible, actual tool, tangible skill, like you're talking about skill, of being aware and in tune with this mindset that mindfulness is our control.
Well, everything sincerely starts with something as simple as a thought. A thought eventually will turn into an emotion. One of the reasons why I'm so excited to bring not only the map up in this 3-part series, but to bring it up with you, Jamar, is an awesome opportunity, because what I've noticed about your approach towards life and pretty much everything that you do is that you take the path of grace in most situations that I've seen you in so far. And what I mean by the path of grace is you kind of always have this intuitive feeling within you, and you know the difference between right or wrong. You can fight it, you can argue with it, but it's the gut feeling that comes up. You get this feeling and you follow it because you just know it's right. So the minute that you start negotiating with that thought, you have duality. You have right and left. You have Democrats and Republicans. You have like, but what I'm getting at, Jamar, is that since I have known you, you have, at least as far as I can tell, taken grace very seriously. And I'm not saying that I don't take grace seriously as well, but in my past, I'm a good negotiator. So I would negotiate with myself. And in times where things would hurt or they'd be difficult or they'd be frustrating, instead of intuitively knowing and going in the direction that I know I should, maybe I shied away from it because it was hard. Maybe I shied away from it because I was scared. Maybe I shied away from it because it hurt. So I saw a clip from The Big Bang Theory that was a really good example, okay, of what I feel like we all go through when we're trying to wrap our head around what mindfulness is and approaches towards dealing with it, because they're out there and everybody knows it. I'll get to specifically what I'm talking about, but right now let's roll this clip, and I'd like you guys to kind of just get into the feeling of a television show that talks about a very simple concept, but they just brush right over it like it's no big deal. And this could very well be the answer to a lot of the suffering that's going on right now.
You know, I read that washing dishes can be an excellent form of meditation. The key is that while washing the dishes, one should only be washing the dishes.
Just because you have that accent doesn't mean what you say isn't stupid.
No, seriously, it's about being present in the moment, focusing on the feeling of the warm water, the smell of the detergent, the sound of the dishes squeaking, and following your own breath. It's about simply being.
Huh. Okay. I'll try it.
I need 3 people out front.
I'll be late.
Me.
I'm here.
No fair! I was meditating!
So I think every one of us has turned on the television and seen a little commercial or a little section about meditation and why it's good to be mindful. Maybe we've had a self-help book that we've read, or somebody's given us something, a piece of advice, and it sounds great. In concept, we know that there's truth there, because when we look at it, we're like, you know what, man? Yeah, I think I probably should take some time for myself, and it's important that I do that. And then, bam, right back to life, right back to all the complications. So we got into grace versus karma, Jamar, and I said earlier that I thought that I was impressed with how you would choose grace. And so from the mindfulness perspective, I think it would add a lot of value right now if you could inspire people with your understanding of mindfulness and how you use grace in your life to unfold all the things that you know you're here to accomplish.
Man, when you're talking about mindfulness, and like that was such a clear message. Like you said, they brushed over. Yeah, it was a humorous, comical script at that moment. But when he's saying when one should be washing the dishes, one should be washing the dishes, and being alert and being present and totally being in the moment. You know, I think that where we're at, especially in this world right now, Cody, that people right now, if someone didn't work on their capacity and their bandwidth and their ability to focus prior to COVID reflection, this is not the training ground to learn about capacity, bandwidth, and mindfulness, understanding how to be present and focused. Because, man, there's so many moving pieces right now. So many things are out of our control. There's only 2 things that we can control. That's our action, our attitude, and action. Attitude and our activity, our action. And so when we're mindful, when we're being present, to me what it means is being in the moment. You know, I truly believe that being totally present, whether you're totally present and quiet, totally present and just enjoying peaceful state, or totally present and engaged in the moment. And with the grace component, Coach G, I mean, man, the grace, I think it's hard for people who don't understand grace. It's even harder. You know, with the thing about grace is remember, we always talk about this, we're perfectly imperfect. Every single person, every single one of us, we fall short to glory. Every single one of us has challenges. Every single one of us has limiting beliefs, limitations, mindset, blocks, like things, quirky things about us. And so if we don't understand that grace, that we're perfect the way we are, that we need to give self grace and give other people grace, then it can be a mindfulness state of condemnation, of guilt, of shame, of regret, defeat. Oh man, compound darkness.
All right, Jamar. So unclear that
That's my opinion, Coach D.
your opinion comes with a lot of value, because it doesn't necessarily, like, as grace is, it has this way of flowing. And I truly have always valued people that can add that to the way they execute their life. And the reason that I value it is because I'm a Barney, man. Like, I wish I could add grace to everything that I did, but like that, some of the stuff, some of the temptations, some of the things that I might have wanted, I didn't want to wait so long, and maybe I wanted to do it now as opposed to later. And I didn't want to put in as much hard work as I knew that I probably should have, but I was good enough at the hustle to be able to get away with most of it without anybody ever knowing. And what I'm trying to poke at is that in a lot of ways, when this whole situation happened with my injury, I was overwhelmed with thoughts and emotions that I didn't understand. I didn't know how to deal with it. It was so big. It was so strong. It was so overwhelming that nothing that I had experienced, no book I read, no experience I had, no movie that I'd watched came anywhere close to what it is that I was dealing with. I had all these chaotic thoughts in my head that were just nuts. So as much as I tried to move forward with as much grace as possible, and most of the people that supported me would say that they did a pretty darn good job, there were certain small things that I made decision-wise. And I say small things, but what I'm getting at is that there were intuitions that I knew about, and they came in the form of struggle or sting. So for instance, let me give you an active example. When I got hurt, I had these expectations of what I thought should happen in relationship to my life, my recovery, my family. And because of those expectations and how loaded they were with fear and anxiety, I avoided doing some of the hard things that I know that I should have. In order to build relationships and maintain relationships, you have to be willing to go the distance. Sometimes they're going to be great, and sometimes they're going to be challenging and they're going to be difficult. Now, when we have a scenario like the COVID reflection going on, and there's so much going on outside of our control, like you said, Jamar, if you hadn't put in the work when it comes to faith before this had happened, you're trying to develop it now, man. It's tough. Because
boot camp.
I mean, for real. Because listen, Jamar, I put in the mental time for mindfulness. I did the meditation. I read the books. I really went through the process of taking care of myself. But there were certain things or choices that I made, and they weren't drastically bad ones. For instance, maybe we think that we could eat a little bit of chocolate, and then a little bit of chocolate turns into a couple times a week, and then it turns into a once-a-day thing. These are things that once you need to get into shape, you're going to look at these habits that you've developed, and you're going to be like, whoa, now I have to undo the habit before I actually get to where I'm going. So for me, when I was so hurt and I was wondering why, let's just say my brothers weren't what I needed them to be, or my mom and my dad didn't act like the Partridge Family on television, or all of my friends weren't there every day calling me 7 days a week, I had all this expectation. So what I did is I avoided dealing with the things that I knew I should. And I didn't avoid it with reckless abandon. I just looked at it and said, I don't have it in me right now to deal with this. So I'm just going to work on me and move away from the problem. And here's the thing, that worked. But the issue is the problem got bigger. So when this reflection pops up and something that you can't possibly prepare for, like an apocalypse, jumps into your life, all those things that you didn't deal with that were small issues, all of a sudden are right in front of your face. And those small issues, when you weren't paying attention, might have grown into bigger issues. And now all of a sudden that weight is too much to carry. So mindfulness.
Bam.
Oh, I mean, damn.
Yeah, it's called a bam. What you just said is a bam.
for real. And listen, this is what I've learned, that there's just two sides of every coin. And when you think that you got this and you think that you could just flip the coin and do it later, most of the time you can get away with it. But every once in a while, man, that other side of the coin is going to come up. Jamar, give me an example of how you, okay, so the other side of the coin comes up. I'm telling you karma-wise, like for instance, in my relationships, I didn't go and I deal with a tough thing. So I wasn't there to be able to do it together with people on both sides. So that's a karma choice, in my opinion. It wasn't necessarily that I did something wrong. It wasn't necessarily the right thing because of the consequence. And the consequence just meant that it was going to be hard. You know, when you're training, you skin your knees, man. And sometimes you go home and you're so tired that you just pass out. And it's like sometimes you got to get into arguments. Sometimes you got to take charge and understand that maybe it's worth getting through some struggle. So, okay, Jamar, after everything I just shared with you, how can I look at these choices that I've made? They were 100% I was in my control. And how can I turn this into grace? Because I'm not so inspired by all the mistakes I made. I'm not so happy about the idea that it was pretty much my fault. And that if I would have made a better decision, then I wouldn't be in this situation right now, and I wouldn't be so far behind the 8 ball. So what do we have to say from the grace perspective to all of our brothers and sisters, Jamar, that might not have made all the right decisions and are kind of sitting in the karma right now? Like they're sitting in the uncomfortable problem or issue that they might have created.
And so, yeah, that's why I was about to go. And thank you for the karma coming up, because the following, look, if we look at that, the bottom part of that definition, right? After destiny and fate is, let's laser focus on following as an effect from cause. So when you're relating, Coach T, when you're communicating about karma, you're talking about the effect from the cause, right? The effect that has happened from whatever the cause of whatever, right? Is that how you're explaining it?
Pretty much. I mean, with grace, there's a way. You let go, and if discomfort comes along, you understand that it's there for a reason. Even if it's not something that you understand, you have faith that at one point it'll make a play. But when you flip the coin, it's like, man, if it comes up in my favor, shoot, I don't have anything to worry about. Everything's cool. But what you have to worry about is the next time you flip the coin, because now you have a 50-50 chance of it coming up for you or against you. Right. And when I say against you, I don't mean that it's this big negative thing. I mean, real specifically, I'm going to take a situation that I had with my brother last week. For whatever reason, the last 17 years when I broke my neck, it was just an emotional situation that was too volatile for us to be able to fix whatever was wrong between us. Mm-hmm. And what it came down to is after 17 years, I just loved my brother and I missed him and I wanted him back in my life. So instead of this being some big blowout where we sit here and talk everything out, we had a meeting and he came over and I looked at him and I told him that I loved him and that I need him in my life. And I accepted the idea that even though there were two sides to every story, that I wasn't there the way that I would have liked to be as an older brother for him, because I was too afraid of what might happen. I was too afraid of the fact that it hurt so bad that I didn't know if we'd be able to fix it. But if I would have just gone into it, even in a volatile situation, and did what I had to do to let him know that I loved him, and maybe we tussled it out, it could have worked out. So different things like this, that's a specific example, is something I think during this COVID reflection, we have the opportunity to really look at.
Coach, I've got a question for you. I was just thinking about this as you're explaining that, because we're talking about karma versus grace, as in like an opponent, like one versus the other, right? But what if it goes together? When I look at karma, especially following that definition, right, of the following effect from the cause, that's basically sow and reap, right? Sow and reap. So what we will reap what we sow, right? And so if you look at that basically in karma, like what we're putting out there is gonna the harvest of it is gonna come back. What we're planting is gonna grow, right? So the following as effect from cause. So whatever we're planting, that's the sow, and then the reaping comes up from what we're planting. But what if it goes together? Like, what if it's not versus the grace, because what if it's both of it's there, and all experience, and I think every person who will ever walk the planet has things that they
scenario, but you get the opportunity to recorrect. I believe that sometimes when you pick karma, you flip a coin, it's almost like you you build up this wealth, but it's false, because at the end of the day, you didn't necessarily win it. An example, like let's say you go to the casino and you get the jackpot, and you can your bid with gambling, because man, you went to the time won $10,000. And I'm not saying that that's not a possibility, but at the same time, what happens when you take your rent money to the casino hoping to get a jackpot and then you lose everything? And what I'm getting at is that somebody that is taking the path of grace, they know in their heart that that's not the way to go. Even though you hit the jackpot, even though it felt really good, even though you have all the money and you can pay rent for the next 6 months, you know inside that it's a sustainable way to go. Nobody be doing it. So you got lucky and it felt good. But if you continue to flip the coin, eventually, man, you're going to have to deal with the other side. And what I'm getting at is that there's nothing wrong with one. I feel karma and grace, that it's the same thing. But when you realize your free will to be able to pursue something other than what intuitively you really know you should be pursuing, that's when it gets difficult.
Well, you want to talk about the other side. Sometimes the other side stings.
Sting is something that I've learned in this last couple of weeks.
What is that? What is that? Like, sting is definitely where you hear that word, is like, ow. Oh,
Action needed. Action needed. Action needed.
Oh, shoot. Ah.
So, oh, hey.
Oh, like you ever touch an iron?
Don't.
That's the thing. That's the thing.
So I don't know. That's kind of what I think a lot of people might be experiencing